Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last week. Let's get to it. Well, the first thing I want to say is thank you all for many of you, for commenting kindly on my video yesterday in which I was singing a song from the Bo Burnham special. I watched Inside by Bo Burnham and was so moved by a lot of it, but particularly this one song, that I just had to learn that song. And then after I learned it, I thought maybe I should just record it. So I just turned on the camera, recorded it, posted it on YouTube. And a lot of you were really kind about that. It was a bit of a leap of faith of, well, I don't know if this is what people want from me. But I've been a musician a lot longer than I've been a therapist and a lot longer than I've been a podcaster. And so me playing my acoustic guitar in this office is, just like me just being a human. So you caught a little glimpse into my regular life there. Anyway, thank you all for being really kind. I read all the comments because I was like, what do people think of this? And be careful about it complimenting me because I might do it a lot more often, and I don't think anyone wants to see any of that. I mean, well, to be honest, I was thinking about maybe doing it every once in a while, maybe like every 6 months or something. I'll just post a little video like that. I'm not quite so sure. But anyway, yeah, I mean, that song was so moving to me. And if you heard my whole audio episode with Umberto, you know all about that. Okay, Brandon and Julia video from last week. Very interesting video where Ron went off on Brandon. Lean says, at no point did the dad come across like he was hoping his son would figure it out. It felt like the father was actively discouraging his son from succeeding. Yes, it very much felt that way. Kyoko says, good old Kyoko says, I feel bad for Brandon being put down like that. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it was hard to watch. Hard to watch. Paul says, as someone who grew up with somewhat controlling parents, they did not treat me like an adult until after I moved out of the house. Once we had some space and boundaries between us, my relationship with my parents got much better. Now I enjoy visiting and spending time with them. Okay. Good for you, Paul. Right. I can imagine that happening for Brandon as well, where once he moves out, things will return to homeostasis and they'll be able to get along. Seelan says, it's difficult to feel empathy for parents who ruin their kids' lives because of their own unresolved issues. Yeah, perhaps. Good old Sue says, don't come to me for help is what Ron said, right? That's just awful. I can remember my dad saying things like that to me. Luckily, with counseling, I realized I was always there for myself. Well, good for you, Sue. I'm glad that you had some healing around that and that you took care of yourself. That's great. Sarah says, I have no way of proving this, but I feel like their words, the parents, I feel like their words say, you can't do this, you haven't paid bills in your life, but their hearts are saying, you are our friend and companion that gives our life purpose, and we like having you around, and we don't want you to go. But the second thing is harder to say. Right, Sarah, you're very astute. I believe that to be true as well. That underneath all that anger and, enmeshment, the statement probably is something like this. And you make a good point. I hadn't really thought about it in those words of, you are our friend and companion. It's been the three of us this whole time, and we don't know what life is going to be like without you. So please don't go. But it's harder to say that because if you have relational traumas, it's hard to admit that sort of thing. And instead, you'd say, you're worthless. You can't do this on your own. Please don't leave. Or you're not going to succeed. Good old Yo-Yo-Yo says, OMG, my mom was like this too. She had a delusion where none of her kids would move out of the house. It was a weird fantasy world that she was living in. Wolfie, good old Wolfie says, I can relate so much to Brandon in this case. My core belief is that I can't change anything by speaking up, so what's the point in speaking up? I can't move out of the house because I am incompetent, and I am not sure if it's false or not, because my past tells me the answer. Well, Wolfie, I hope you've listened to my deep dives on dependent personality disorder and you have gone to therapy, because I'm guessing you would benefit greatly from that. It sounds like you have some distorted schemas that are plaguing you and not giving you a fair perspective of who you are and what you're capable of. Lena says, this scene was so hard to watch. I don't know if it's my dad's way to exert power over me or the only way he knows how to express concern. It's confusing and it hurts me. My therapist has tried to show me that my dad probably has his own unresolved traumas. Right, Lena. So your therapist is like me and looks at behavior like that and says, well, I mean, it's not fair that your dad treats you that way, but it's probable that he has his own unresolved traumas. But you also bring up this other interesting angle to this, Lena, where you're saying, is it my dad trying to exert power over me? Or is it my dad's only way that he knows how to express concern? And I think that's a valid possibility, that for some parents, they don't know how to express concern in a vulnerable way. They only know how to express concern through worry or control, which is the breeding ground for dependent personality. Mike and Natalie video. AR, good old AR, says, the irony of Mike getting frustrated by someone else not answering questions. Right. Yeah. Mike getting upset about someone not answering questions is ironic. Big Ron says, I am also avoidant in relationships when it comes to conflict, but pretending that you don't know why. So in Mike, but Mike pretending that you don't know why your wife is upset rather than telling your mom there was a misunderstanding over something she said, that is next level avoidant. If he wants to avoid conflict, this is the worst way to do it. Take it from me as an avoiding conflict pro. It takes one to know one, right, Ron? Sylvia says, why do Americans think they can send someone back to their country like they return delivery packages? You don't hold the keys to the country, right? I didn't comment on that comment by Trish, which was send her back to the country. I don't know if she meant that literally or not, but certainly we've seen sentiments like that from Americans on this show. And it comes from, I believe, this American exceptionalism idea, this idea that, look, you're a foreigner and you need to show me respect because I am giving you opportunity. It's a place of privilege. It's this assumption that you have more to offer just based on the fact that you live in the United States. And it's also based on this notion that immigrants can't stay here, that they need someone to vouch for them, which is true sometimes, but obviously not true other times. And also based on xenophobia and other kinds of nasty bigotry. And I think that was shown in that. There's a lot of ways Trish could have expressed her upsetness in the moment. She just could have been like, wow. And actually, I didn't comment on this, but it was interesting to see the mom and Mike, Trish and Mike, both upset at Natalie in almost the same way. They both would have long periods of silence, and then they would just say these kinds of cliches like, whew, well, what are you going to do? Or, well, that was interesting. These kinds of statements that are understandable when you're stressed out, but it's telling that Mike is so much like his mom maybe. And I always wonder about the other parents, like with Colt. We know his relationship with Debbie, but what was the relationship with the dad as a 3-person unit? What's Mike's relationship with his dad? What was the dad like in the house? I think that would give us a lot of data as to what Mike's or Colt's or any of the other people on this show's relational traumas and explain their behavior. Good old Z says, I wonder if Natalie mentioned her mom because Mike and his mom were ganging up on her. Right. So good point, Z. And I actually thought about this later after I stopped recording, that in the moment, Natalie comes out in the morning of, as she's leaving, and says, I talked to my mom, and my mom said I shouldn't take this crap from you, and so I'm leaving, and I'm not going to talk to you. And she boldly gets in the car and says, let's drive off. And it just seemed kind of out of left field because the night before she was upset, but she was laughing a lot. The next day she comes out raring to go. And I thought about that. I thought, I bet you anything Natalie thought that she was being ganged up on and actually didn't, because she doesn't have a connection with herself. She doesn't have the ability to stand on her own 2 feet and just say, look, I don't like it when you do this. Or I thought I heard you say this. Is that what you said? Because that would have been the differentiated thing to say, would be to immediately turn to Trish and say, did you just call me a hooker? Because I don't know, did you just, what just happened here? Because if you did, that hurts my feelings. That'd be a differentiated thing to do. A less differentiated thing to do is to tell Mike and not Trish, just to go to Mike, right? A less differentiated thing to do would be to not bring it up ever again and laugh all night long because you're all bottled up inside. A less differentiated thing to do is when provided an opportunity to voice the concern as people are yelling at you, what is going on, and not say anything because you don't trust other people. And a less differentiated thing to do is to bring up another person to validate what you are already valid to say. You're already valid to say, I don't like being treated this way. So, Natalie is not, she doesn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be undifferentiated, but it is sort of an example of that. So good call, Z, good observation. I should have saw that in the moment. Angela and Michael videos. Bao says, my mom tried everything to quit smoking. Patches, psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, going cold turkey, gradual reduction, and nothing worked. Yeah, quitting smoking is one of the hardest things anyone could try to do. Athetius says, I quit heroin and I quit cigarettes. Honestly, I think cigarettes were harder. Yeah, a lot of people will report that. Not that quitting heroin is easy, but quitting cigarettes is very, very hard. Eugenie says, I quit alcohol, cocaine, amphetamine, cigarettes, and then finally the nicotine gum. I've been sober for almost 4 years now. 2 thumbs up to you, Eugenie. I always love hearing comments like that. Bao again says, throwing her cigarette butt on the ground and crushing it with her foot, that is littering. This is a smoker habit that annoys the heck out of me. Agreed, Bao. Littering is not okay. And I should have mentioned that when it happened. But I don't know. There's just so much to talk about with Angela. Sneffery says, I couldn't help but find it funny that Angela thought she could just bulldoze the doctor into performing a cosmetic surgery on her. The doctor says, I'm not going to perform a nicotine the doctor says, I'm going to perform a nicotine test on you. And Angela says, no, you're not. And then Sneffery says, okay, then no surgery. You can't expect to be able to bulldoze and overpower every single person in your life who tells you no until they give in to you. Yeah, true. There's a very weird dynamic between Angela and her physicians. On one hand, obviously, we can look to Angela and say, what is going on? You have to follow the doctor's orders. Like, they're giving you very clear boundaries. Why are you trying to bulldoze them the way you bulldoze other people? But the physicians, like I was saying in the video, are also, in the clips that we're seeing, they're not providing enough options. They're just saying, don't smoke. Like it's this easy thing for a smoker to be able to do. She's been smoking for 40 years. They should have been giving her all sorts of options and helping her make a choice about that, just to be like, look, don't smoke. Now, on one hand, I get it because it's not really the physician's place. But I don't know. There just seemed to be a flippant attitude to the physicians of just like, why are you smoking still? Just stop smoking, as if it's easy. Liz says, I listen to affirmations talking about hypnotherapy kinds of things. I listen to affirmations when I am asleep because I feel like it gets all those positive thoughts into my psyche, which is kind of what the hypnotherapy does from what I understand. You're right. It works too. I don't know if it's placebo or what. My life has done a complete 180. I can't even believe how far I've come since that first step of just brainwashing myself, LOL. Right. So you could consider hypnotherapy and self-affirmations and listening to tapes as you're sleeping to be brainwashing yourself, telling you, and also positive self-talk or meditation. There are certain meditations that you can engage in along these lines of just like, I am a good person. Everyone out there, listen, I'll do it too, and you do it too. Repeat after me in your head or out loud. Put your hand on your chest. Say, I am a worthy person. I'm a good person. I am a good person. I try hard to do the right thing, and I deserve to be recognized. I have a lot of love to give, and sometimes people don't see that. I deserve to love myself. I deserve to have self-esteem. I deserve to feel like I matter. I matter. I'm good. Oh, here's a good one. Here's a good one. I am good enough as I am right now. I am good enough right now. I don't have to change. I'm already good enough. you say it to yourself over and over again, something's going to change. And Liz has it figured out. She listens to brainwashing tapes while she sleeps. I don't know the research why. I'm guessing that while you're sleeping, there are different phases of sleep where it's more likely to get in than others, but I don't know the research. Elizabeth and Andre video. Kara says that Charlie impression was perfect. Laughy face. Right, so I was getting quite unregulated and undifferentiated with Charlie, and so I impersonated Charlie, and so good old Yo-Yo says, wow, I was extremely angry at someone today, and you are right, Kirk. Life is too short to drag these things on. Thanks, Dr. Honda, for your calm, reasonable, healthy voice. LOL. You're welcome, Yo-Yo. Big Ed. Colleen says, growing up, my best friend called it being put in the bone zone when male friends would want something more. Ha ha ha. Right. So there's the friend zone, and then, boys will say, oh, I don't want to be I've been friend zoned. And then girls will say, oh, I'm being put in the bone zone by this friend. What's happening here? Someone's name that I can't pronounce because I believe it's Japanese characters. I'm fourth generation Japanese. My dad doesn't even speak Japanese. Says, I hate it when he dangles. So I hate it when Big Ed dangles the carrot like, I want to take care of you. He did that with Rose too. Yes, he did. And listen to my whole episode on love bombing because I talk all about that. Prue says, I am married 10 years this past Sunday. I met a coworker about 7 years ago who was a married man. We became good friends. Never once did my husband get jealous, resentful, or mean about our friendship. When we were eventually able to get our families together, my husband really liked my friend and our families have become great friends. Stop letting your partners dictate your life. Yeah. So again, the jealousy is normal, but what do we do with that? And it's particularly if you have a lot of relational traumas, you're going to have a lot more jealousy, a lot more fear, which is often transformed into control, which is what jealousy is. What a form of jealousy is. Brit Brat says, thank you for your explanation, Dr. Honda. I always wondered why people stayed in situations like that so I was talking about why Liz might stay in a relationship like that. I always wondered why people stayed in situations like that without seemingly anything really holding them there. I never considered the aspect of people turning off those portions of their brains because they're so conditioned to behave that way for self-preservation. It's very eye-opening. Right, so I don't know exactly what I was saying, but often for some people, the way they were raised, they're early in life, they figure out in the face of abuse, you actually to self-preserve, you have to shut down parts of yourself in order to survive. Sometimes shutting down the portion of yourself that notices your needs or shuts down this part of yourself that even questions whether or not you should be in this relationship. Because when you're 5, you can't question the relationship. You just have to put up with it. So you just go into this survival mode. And a lot of adults are walking around like that, and they come across an abusive person, and that abusive person will trigger that in that person. And half of their brain essentially, metaphorically turns off. And they never even raise the question, should I be in this relationship? And then, 15 years later, they get out of the relationship and they just think, why did I stay? But, it's because of that relational trauma and that neurological reality. Love bombing episode, one comment that I will include here. Jane says, I came to this episode on love bombing to roast Big Ed, but instead I just realized one of my friends was a high manipulator love bomber, and cutting them off from my life was the best decision I ever made. Okay, well, good for you, Jane. Papillon, so frenemies. Papillon says, I have borderline personality disorder and Dr. Honda is spot on. I behave exactly like Trisha when I get triggered at this level. We should give her credit for handling herself so well under the circumstances. She made sure not to make anything worse because of her emotions by leaving. Yeah, I mean, look, was Trisha out of line? Maybe. There were a lot of comments, people saying like Trisha, and the only contact I have with Trisha is the 3 videos that I've watched. I have no other knowledge of who she is. So everything I know about her, all the vibe I get from her, and if you're a fan of Trisha, then obviously a lot more about her. But so some people were saying, well, I don't think Dr. Honda understands how bad Trisha is. And it's true, I don't. And some people are thinking, well, I think Dr. Honda is giving Trisha a pass, or like not calling her behavior out on what it is. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a therapist and I just see people suffering. I'm not saying that she was justified. I'm not saying that Ethan didn't experience I'm not saying that Ethan didn't experience abuse in that moment or other moments, but I don't really know because I'm just sort of dipping in. And the conflict happened at the very end of that episode. The first hour and 20 minutes was just them talking about random stuff. And then, so maybe Trisha is abusive to him. I don't know. If I watched more, maybe I would understand that. But the bottom line is that she she doesn't self-diagnose. She's actually been to therapists, from what I understand, who have diagnosed her with borderline. And what that means is that you have a lot of relational traumas that can be triggered when there is conflict and when there is possible rejection or even just perceived rejection. The word borderline, to be clear to everyone, if you don't know, and if you listen to my other episodes, you understand this, but the reason why we use the word borderline, and the word borderline was invented 70 years ago in psychoanalysis, because people would come into therapy and they would seem as if they were schizophrenic. They would seem as though they were delusional. Schizophrenia delusions like hearing voices or believing that you're a god or believing that you're a Napoleon or something. Those are delusions. Or believing that the government is listening in on your head. Those are delusions, right? Well, some people were coming into therapy who seemed like they were delusional, but they didn't really fit the full criteria. So we called them borderline because they were on the borderline between having a grasp on reality and not having a grasp on reality. These people would come into therapy and would accuse the therapist of things that the therapist would say, what is happening right here? Or people in their family would say, our family member accuses us of things that we have never done before. And they seem to be, their emotions seem to be completely out of line with what's happening in the situation. Now, not everyone with borderline personality disorder is like this, but some are, right? And so I say this because it's important that if we understand that if Trisha does indeed suffer from borderline personality disorder, this is no joke. This isn't just some decision that she decides to make. Now, you could still say she's responsible for her behavior, but for her to engage in a relationship where there is conflict and having her traumas being triggered and causing this borderline delusional perspective kicking in, the fact that that happens is not her fault. Now, it's her responsibility to get therapy. It's her responsibility to try to manage it as best as she can. It's her responsibility to maybe apologize for it, or to maybe even tell Ethan, by the way, I have borderline, so we have to be careful around these. Maybe it's her responsibility to do that. But the fact that she had that reaction in the moment, again, I don't know because I would have to talk with her, but if she says she's borderline, she seemed triggered in the moment. She seemed mildly triggered early on in the episode, but when I look back, and highly triggered right at the end when he was being sarcastic with her. Now, watching from the outside, you would say, well, Ethan was being sarcastic in a justified manner. Sure, who knows? And as a therapist, I don't make those decisions. I don't be like, you're right, you're wrong. I'm usually there trying to help people to, communicate better and to reduce their conflict. I'm not usually, or I'm never interested in who's to blame, unless it's flat out abuse, like Trisha just took a microphone and hit him over the head. Then I would say Trisha is to blame for that, obviously. But what I'm interested in, well, anyway, the point is that you could say that Ethan was treated unfairly, but we would also look at Trisha and say that she is enacting her disorder. And it takes years, decades, perhaps too long for us to live, meaning that I've treated people and I've known people who have been in intensive treatment for borderline for 30 years and their symptoms come down to like 50%, maybe 25%. Still have a significant amount of symptoms. So that's what I see when I see that. I don't go, oh, Trisha, whoa, what's wrong with her? What I see is, oh, she's being triggered in this moment. Like, ouch. It's not Ethan's responsibility to make up for that, but that's what I see. Part-time volunteer says, the part about denying the hurt, so remember when Trisha was denying that she was bothered. The part about denying the hurt really hit close to me, but really hit close to home for me. Every time I went through something horrible, I said, every time I went through something horrible, I said, I'm not hurt. It doesn't bother me that much. I'm not hurt. Right. So part-time volunteer is saying they also had a really hard time admitting, even to themselves, that they were hurt because of relational traumas, I'm guessing. Lias says, thank you for standing up for OCD sufferers. The media makes us look like just people who like stuff organized, and there's so much more to OCD. Yes, agreed. OCD is one of the most debilitating disorders around. It is awful. It is not just being tidy. Anna says, I really appreciate your response to this. All I have seen from others is them vilifying Trisha online when it is so clearly not a black and white situation. It's so sad to see two people who obviously care deeply about each other end up in this situation over what seems to be a compounded slew of misunderstandings and miscommunication. Right, Anna, that would be my guess if I knew more about it, that it was a compounded slew of misunderstandings and miscommunication, as you put it. Jeanette says, Trisha will pick at him and belittle him in little ways over and over, episode to episode. I think it just builds up over time where it's harder to empathize with a person when they abuse you and you don't properly address it. Okay, Jeanette, I'll take your word for that. Sounds possible. Anna says, I really hope Trisha and Ethan see this video. I'm going to tweet it at them. So, go ahead and tweet it at people. But I always am a little mortified to think about the people on these videos seeing it. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. Because, I'm making these speculations, and if Trisha were to watch it, I would want to be there with her and go and stop the video and go, does that make sense to you, or what's going on? Because I'm just rambling, and at no point can the person raise their hand and stop me and say, no, actually, which is the way I operate as a therapist when I'm working with students or trainees or supervisees or consultees or clients. They can say, no, you don't got, and okay, please tell me. Whereas I can't do that when they're just watching a video. So it always kind of like, I hope that I got most of it right. And by the way, someone emailed in and said that Liz from Big Ed had seen some of my analysis and was on some other show and some other YouTube show. And Liz reported that she watched my videos and that I was accurate in some ways. It wasn't very specific, but so on that level, I was like, oh, she watched it? Okay, she thought it was accurate. I mean, who knows if she thought it was all accurate or how much she watched, but just a little side note. Olivia on YouTube says, as someone who was actually in an abusive relationship with the father of my child for years, I had to deal with gaslighting the whole time to the point I still can't trust my thoughts or memories. It really bothers me that people are using the word gaslighting for situations where it doesn't call for it. I have been going to therapy for a year now for things my abuser did. Right. So stop saying I'm so OCD when you're just tidy. Stop saying gaslighting when someone is either in denial or they're lying. If they're just lying and you're detecting that they're lying, that's not gaslighting. Gaslighting, or at least the term that we have been using it for decades, is in abusive relationships, usually ongoing, where the person is on a campaign to make you actually feel as if you do not understand how to judge reality. And the abuser knows they're doing that to you. It's a very specific situation, and the victims of that, as Olivia was, they deserve to have that word gaslighting as a way of conveying how horrible it was for them. But now, given the way gaslighting is being used in culture, Olivia could raise her hand in a room and say, I was gaslit, and people would say, oh, you were lied to? Or, oh, someone was trying to deceive you and was acting like they weren't really trying to deceive you. And Olivia would be like, no, I was in an abusive relationship for years and years and years where this person was on a campaign to undermine my ability to judge reality. And I divorced him 10 years ago. I'm still in therapy, and I'm still messed up in my head because of that. That is gaslighting. Sandra says, Ethan has had the patience of Now, getting back to gaslighting, language changes, and I'm old enough to see that. Language has changed throughout my life, and I'll adjust. But we still need to honor those people who have been through what we used to call gaslighting before. We need a new word like extreme gaslighting or something, or abusive gaslighting, or 10-year-long abusive gaslighting. They deserve to have a word to describe what they went through. Sandra says, Ethan has had the patience of a saint with Trisha. I feel triggered watching how he's been treated and how much he allows. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that because I've only seen a few of their videos, but given what we've seen and given a lot of the comments, I'll take your word for it. All right, everyone, that does it for that episode, and it's time for a new week of me doing reaction videos. I'm raring to go. I'm going to actually stop this recording, and I'm going to do some more reaction videos. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.